Well, for the first time, we're hearing Alex Murdaugh describe the roadside shooting in his own voice. It happened just a few months after the murders of his wife and son. Well, in this video, this is from the scene. Murdaugh called 911 on September 4th, 2021, saying he'd been shot while on the side of a road in Hampton County. Well, today, the judge allowed the jury to hear audio from a phone interview between Murdaugh and a state investigator. Now, in this audio, Murdaugh admits he set the whole thing up, saying he thought it would be easier for his family if he were dead.
Murdaugh admitted he asked Curtis Eddie Smith to shoot him. This way, his surviving son Buster would then collect money from his life insurance policy. Smith is on the witness list, but it's still unclear if he'll be called to testify. Even though the roadside shooting happened after Maggie and Paul were killed, the judge decided to let the jury hear about it because the defense brought up Smith and their line of questioning. The prosecution wanted the jury to hear this evidence because they say it shows a pattern of lies.
Fox Carolina's Grace Runkle is in Walterboro to break down today's testimony.
Today's testimony was highly anticipated, especially after so much back and forth between the judge, the state, and the defense about whether or not the jury would actually get to hear testimony about the side of the road incident. A sled agent took the stand to testify how Murdaugh's story changed over time about what actually happened that day. Take a listen to this audio from an interview that agent had with Murdaugh after he finally confessed it was all his idea.
Why weren't you truthful with us when this initially happened?
I don't have a good reason. I was in a bad place.
Did Alex Murdaugh ever say that there was any risk or threat to Buster?
He said no. No, he did not. He actually denied it when we asked.
Did Alex Murdaugh say that Curtis Eddie Smith had anything to do with the murders of Moselle?
He denied it when we asked.
And is there any evidence that Curtis Eddie Smith had anything to do with Moselle?
None whatsoever.
That line of questioning from the state mirrors what we heard the defense ask another sled agent yesterday. The defense has argued Sled focused in on Murdaugh as a suspect too early and did not take into account other people like Curtis Eddie Smith or the people Smith bought drugs from. The state established Smith was not tied to the crime scene at Moselle and laid out a timeline that shows Murdaugh only changed his story about the side of the road once Sled agents began to investigate Smith and saw large money transfers from Murdaugh to Smith. The state has said that that testimony was key to establishing a pattern of deception. We've already heard from the defense that they're planning a pretty lengthy cross-examination, and that's where things will pick back up tomorrow morning. In Walterboro, Grace Runkle, Fox Carolina News.
And make sure you stay connected to Fox Carolina News as this trial continues. We've been covering it from the very beginning. You can find the very latest on air, online at foxcarolina.com. You can also stream us anytime, Roku, Apple, and Fire TV.